Hello again, and welcome to Infinity. I'm Charlie Seraphin. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about death. It's a return visit for both of our guests. That kind of has a different ring to it, too, doesn't it? Alan Shulak and Bill Kautz. Alan is one of the founders of the School of Consciousness Studies at John F. Kennedy University, where he teaches courses in mysticism. Bill Kautz is a staff scientist at SRI International, as well as director of the Center for Applied Intuition in San Francisco. Death as a taboo subject, and yet in recent days, weeks, months, there has been a lot of discussion of death, not in the traditional taboo sense. What do you attribute that to? Ellen, let's start with you.
Well, I think first of all, people are beginning to have some notion that's rather unusual for our civilization, and that is that they're not their physical body. And they ask themselves, well, what am I? I'm something else, which leads them into some interesting explorations and takes them down some interesting alleyways. One is that instead of being body, man might be mind, or more interestingly put, man might be consciousness. And of course, a lot of people are coming forward with experiences that say, well, I've had experiences outside of my body, experiences during sleep, perhaps, that were very powerful, or experiences on an operating table that were very powerful, that say to me, I am a consciousness, I am not body. And then, of course, the natural question is that not what survives what we think of as physical death? And people, of course, are being encouraged in many ways. There's enough of an audience for these sorts of things today. Seminars, as I'm so fond of saying, people used to get burned for making such pronouncements as some of the things that are being said today at seminars, so they get paid for them. And very interesting things that people are going through.
Burned literally at the stake.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Bill, what about in the scientific explorations of our time? Is there a renewed scientific interest in the meaning of life and the meaning of death?
It's gradually coming, Charlie, though it's sad to say that science has practically nothing to say about these matters. In fact, science has practically nothing to say about everything that's really important to people. The issues that come up for people about their own lives, the meaning of their lives, science has just not dealt with that, even though it's gone very deeply and soundly and wonderfully into other areas which are more sense-related and more material. So we can't really turn to science to find out much about the death experience, the process of dying, or what it might be like after one dies. However, there are a couple exceptions. There's some work in psychology with the so-called near-death experience. These are the adventures that people have who come very, very close to death. In some cases, they clinically die, and then a few moments later, they come back to life again. And the amazing thing is that the subjective accounts that these people give are very much the same. They all go through the same sequence of experiences, almost all of them do. And that's very interesting. This doesn't prove that that's what death is like, of course, because they did come back. But it does suggest that this might be the beginning of a after-death existence, evidence of an after-death existence. There's also some work from parapsychology. For over 100 years, this issue of what's called a survival question has been studied by various means to try to obtain some kind of proof that might be acceptable to a scientific mind as to whether or not something about a human being actually survives physical death. Usually, though, it takes the form of information. That is, we work through mediums, through people with very strong intuitive abilities, through psychics, and obtain information supposedly from dead people, and then that information is offered as evidence that these people have indeed survived. But there's a lot of question about whether that information can serve as evidence or not, because we seem to be able to get the same information independent of these sources.
Mm-hmm. Not exactly following the scientific method.
Well, they're using the method, but they're stretching it and applying it in areas where the usual criteria of repeatability uh, can't really be satisfied.
Alan, in several schools of mysticism, it's said that you can't experience enlightenment until you experience your own death. What is meant by that?
Well, that's a kind of death that they're speaking of that doesn't have. It's not exactly the same thing as what we think of as physical death. Although there's some interesting parallels. It has to do with the death, or the really transformation is a better word. The transformation of yourself as you are right now. And changing that self is a very difficult process because that self is stubborn. In a sense, it can be looked at as energy patterns, I suppose, what we are, the thought processes that we have. And things in the universe seem to want to maintain themselves and to be what they are and continue. So there's a certain battle that goes on that classical mystical literature traces and writes about between the transformation process that's necessary, or the deaths of the self that we have to go through. If you believe in reincarnation, we're just stretching the process many more hundreds of thousands of years than just 80 or 90. And the needs of people to be what they are, to maintain what they are. And anyone who's gone through the process of real, serious change, whether it's been through an encounter group or through trying to get along with a spouse or something of that kind, one knows how difficult it is. But the process is very much like that.
Giving up the ego?
That's right. The ego being looked at as our habit patterns, the ways we think, the conclusions we come to. In other words, it's our mental life, a life that imprisons us in various ways. And at the same time, I think many people feel that there is a larger life that they could experience. They have good moments when they feel they can break through, look beyond relationships that are closed and are tight and suffocating, or have some experience with nature, with a good friend, or just by themselves, in which they sense that there's something much more real than themselves as they've come to know themselves.
Let me follow a thought if I can, and I'll put it in the form of a question because it keeps nagging at me, and I won't be able to go on to anything else unless I deal with this. If life is meaningful and is a process of growth and development, at least hopefully it is in a positive sense, and death takes on some meaning because it's a sort of cleansing action at the end of that process, and if we believe in reincarnation, then it begins again and in another form, then what's the point of having, for example, an infant that is born and lives an hour or a day or a week or 2 weeks and then dies? And many people in dealing with death, when a grandparent dies and the grandparent is 86 years old and has lived a productive, fruitful life and dies quietly in one's sleep, they say, well, that's the way it was supposed to have been. People can deal with that. But when a child dies, particularly a very young child, it's very difficult for people who are left behind to come to grips with that. There doesn't seem to be, externally, any meaning in that kind of situation. Either one of you want to take a shot at it? Okay.
Yes, I'd like to deal with that. I think the answer to this lies in this, that you have to think of what is existence really all about, and it's really all the perennial philosophy really agrees that the real beingness is on a higher dimension than this one, a dimension in which what we see of in this earth life is just a shadow or a projection of what's really going on. Now, if that's true, then what happens here has to be looked at quite differently. So that one way to enrich that grander existence is to drop into this life and go through a 87-year series of experiences and adventures, and which constitute some kind of growth by the standards of this grander existence. But another way might be just to drop in and take a look, and then go back. We're told by some of the deeper channels here that this often happens for individuals who died a violent death, so that they were propelled out of this level of existence rather suddenly and didn't have a chance to accommodate, so they want to come back and just touch base again. However, we can imagine that there would be many other reasons why this is so. We did a study of so-called crib death many years ago, which, as you probably know, are a kind of infant death where there are no physical symptoms that would otherwise explain the death. It's a leading cause of infant death apart from accidents. And this was the kind of explanation that we got, that sometimes this is sort of a last desperate act on the part of the being. In other cases, a being will come into this life momentarily as a kind of gift to the parents to put them through a admittedly shocking experience, but one from which they learn a great deal in a short time. A bit painful, of course.
Is that, Alan, a part of any mystical tradition in that someone's living and dying really doesn't have a whole lot to do with them as an individual, but really it's the impact that they leave behind on other people?
Yes, absolutely.
Other lives?
Well, the two are so closely related. You've heard, I'm sure, of the law of karma, which is explicit in a great many mystical systems and implicit in some. Some people feel it's implicit in Christianity, although not clearly spelled out, that you can see some kind of workings of destiny on a very grand scale.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you?
Yeah, and that there are reasons for all these things. There are reasons that have to do with either issues we don't understand or things that might have to do with other lives, although certainly that has not been a part of standard Christian teaching. At any rate, you have to look at this business of the experiences that an infant has from the perspective of not just the needs of that infant that we might not be aware of, having been perhaps an evolving consciousness in many previous lives, but also the needs of its mother and father and loved ones. An experience that is certainly not one that anyone would choose to go through, of losing a child, and yet may be necessary to unlock certain keys within us.
What about the stages of death? I think in your previous visit, Alan, you touched on those. Can you review them for us?
Well, the most interesting one, Charlie, is the one that's called a review stage. It seems to be one of the primary purposes for the experience of death in creation itself. And there are lots of different pieces of literature and myths and so on that sort of support this kind of thing, as well as some interesting contemporary parapsychological research. That is that one of the things that happens after death is that one gets, oh goody, to review that lastmost life. And the review of it is kind of like the unwinding of a film. But one sees much greater and much more deeply because one knows it isn't my life now. I am different than that life. So the impressions of that life, the experiences unwind. There's apparently at this particular level of the after-death state kind of a vacuum state. There's nothing else happening, so to speak. So nothing else can occur except this unwinding of the life you just lived. And because there is a built-in distance, since you don't know it's your life, you can't help but see more. And that seeing we carry with us. We bring with us from life to life. And it's one of the ways of looking at what intuition is all about. Some people are plugged into it, don't repeat errors, and other people just quite haven't gotten enough intuition yet.
Bill, in the scientific method, we always search for pure objectivity, the removal from the experimentation itself. Is there pure objectivity after death in this review stage of life gone by?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's stretching the use of the term objectivity to say that we've got that after death, to be sure. There certainly is, as Alan indicates, a better view, a cleaner and more perspective view of what's really happening, what's really been going on. That's for sure. But we might just remark about this intuition, which we define in our work at the center as a direct knowing process. It's a process in which one can simply get the obstacles out of the way, a lot of the ego barriers and so on, the fears, and can simply can simply act as a channel to the receiving the information that's desired and needed.
Are we just talking high speculation here, or are we talking some means of verification? How do we know this? How do we know any of it?
Well, of course, there's the research that's coming out now, testimony as well as research, provides an amount of data that is baffling to people given their usual way of looking at life. I mean, if it's not baffling, you must have some way of accommodating it. It can be denied and say, well, no, this person didn't have this near-death experience. No, they did not have this particular experience outside their body of consciousness and so on, or whatever. But for people who have had the experience or have had friends or whatever who have had, they need some kind of interpretation. So we're not dealing with mere speculation. On the other hand, we're certainly not dealing with hardcore scientific fact. I mean, we could have certainly a program just on what exactly that is, and it may be not so clear that there's such a thing as hardcore scientific fact. But people have had certain experiences that they need an interpretation of. And whenever you need to interpretate experiences or a set of data, you've got to have some kind of system, a framework, something to put it in. And of course, part of understanding or getting some perspective on our age is that we seem to be in the middle of changing systems, ways of interpreting data.
Bill, looking at something is never the same as doing it yourself. For example, watching a baseball game, the game appears to be much easier than it is if you get out on the field and try to do it, or any other athletic activity, or anything in life, really. Mm-hmm. It always looks a little different from the outside than it does from the inside. How then can we match near-death experiences in reviewing them with the actual experience of death? Mm-hmm. We say, maybe death was like that, but maybe it was something totally different, because after all, when you came back to tell us about it, you're not really dead.
That's right on, Charlie. We're just probably never going to be sure by that kind of mental process, by looking at other people's data, by reading reports and so forth, even talking to these people that might be close friends. There'll always be a gap. And that's the leap of faith, of course, and the leap of intuition, we might say, because there are ways of knowing other than the usual modes which have been so propelled forward into our society by science, and for which we are now giving so much weight in our discourse, in our talk with scientists, in our talk with each other, for that matter.
Alan, is it possible that death today is a different experience than death once was? That death itself as a process is evolving?
Certainly, that's a possibility, and I think it's a possibility because life itself is changing. This other realm of existence on the other side of life is certainly intimately connected with ours. The very vehicle through which we experience death, those who study this area feel we carry with us. I mean, it's part of us. It's here in the room right now. There are three of these so-called astral bodies in this studio.
At least three.
Three that we know. There might be a few more.
Okay.
And
I've got a hunch there are.
Uh-huh.
That's purely speculation on my part.
And the connection between our physical body and this so-called astral energy body, or system of energy is really what it should be called, because it certainly doesn't have dimensions, physical dimensions, is a very intimate one. And as we change, as our manner of life changes, as the quality of our thoughts change, you can be sure that everything that's connected to us is going to change as well. I don't know if it means anything terribly significant in terms of we're not going to go through some of the things that we went through in the past in terms of this astral review or some such thing as that. But certainly things in the universe are very intimately connected.
Is that why we should be interested? I mean, why bother? Why even spend the time discussing death? Because it's a final kind of thing, and it's going to happen to everybody sooner or later anyway. And what's the difference? Why an interest? Why is it critical to study it?
Perhaps the best reason is that people who have done so claim a tremendous enrichment of their lives, that they can no longer look at life in the same way that they could. It's called expanding one's consciousness or awareness, or we might say it's enhancing one's perception. This is certainly one of the lessons of this age now, that so much of what we see out in the world and we sense and perceive is a matter of our perception. It hasn't changed all that much, but our ways of looking at it have changed tremendously, and therefore our reality has changed. And so it goes with this transformation that we call death.
Death is a life or death experience. For some people, death is just the beginning. If a close friend or a relative or someone they know or respect or perhaps even hate dies, it can really mean profound changes in their attitude and put their life on a totally different level. And for some other folks that we've known, death has been almost the beginning of the end. Someone dies, and after that, there's no point in going on, and they seem to go downhill. They don't relate to the rest of the world very well, and sooner or later they die, maybe in the same manner. Suicide is something that seems to always run together. Someone kills themselves, someone else close to them does the same. Why? What is the association, again, between life and death in that manner?
Well, people are so very different. There's really no way of anticipating how they're going to respond to situations. The one that you named of someone, a close friend or a loved one dying, some people can be set into a search mode that can be extremely meaningful in their lives. I mean, just uncover and enrich themselves in the long run just tremendously. And other people can sort of close shop and say, look, this game is too rough. I'm just not going to play it anymore. I'm going to close myself up in a shell. I don't like the rules, or I don't understand the rules. I suppose everyone eventually is going to get in the search mode because life is, according to some of the great spiritual authorities that write on these issues, life is so much more than the satisfaction of the things that are on our mind every moment, getting this and obtaining that and so on. That people eventually, I suppose, is when they get their fill of the other, will look for something more enriching. And certainly the death issue itself is something that in a sense is a help. I mean, it's something that can remind us that we simply are not our physical bodies, but don't panic because we are something else, and the other something else is eternal.
Bill, do people sometimes think you're a bit morbid to have a curiosity about and to use your rational faculties and your intuition to spend as much time considering death as you do? Do they say, here comes that weird Bill again, or whatever they might say?
They may say that for other reasons, but I suppose there are people like this. I respect, though, where people are coming from in these areas. I think mainly the ill perception of death in our culture particularly comes out of a place of fear. And, you can ask, fear of what? Why are people afraid of this? Well, of course, there's the pain of death. There's a sense of identity with the body and a fear of loss of that. But I think the main factor for most people is that they feel that death is going to take away from them something that they think they need. It's like their life is based on a sense of lack, that they feel somehow they've come to the conclusion that there are certain things in this universe that they need in order to be. They lack a real, true sense of identity. Now, this is very, very common, and I don't put anybody down for this. I certainly spent most of my life living in a state of extreme need, a perceived need. And if there's a lack, of course, one wants to satisfy those lacks. And if something appears to be taking away what we think we need, we get scared. We really get scared. And for me, that's, as far as I can see, that's the basis of virtually all fear. And that includes the fear of death or any transformation.
Where does one go if one wants to overcome the fear of death? Where do you go to find out about it?
When people ask me that, I say go inside. And by that, I say it in different ways to different people, but that's the basic message. That the answers to these questions are not found on the outside. You don't go to a scientist to find out. You might go to your minister, but chances are you're not going to get very much from him, except maybe some triggering information. But you've really got to find these answers within yourself. And the amazing thing is they're so easy to come by once you recognize and honor that process of internal inquiry. We all have the ability If we can get little blocks and contrary and unreal beliefs out of the way, to just go inside ourselves and get the answers to practically anything that we want to know. And to open that door, for a person to open that door and start that process flowing, can be a wonderful, wonderful experience.
What about that, Alan? Where can an individual go to find out more about death short of dying?
Well, I just tell them to enroll in my class on reincarnation. It helps to keep enrollment up. Now, I like Bill's answer a lot because ultimately that is the answer to everything. That going inside and getting in contact with the deeper self or deeper processes is not an easy one. And there are times when it may not be possible. Timing is very important. And sometimes just hanging in, and just trusting and just being as positive as possible is all that one can do while the answers are so elusive. But people who continue to try to really understand who they are simply going to be successful, because the real being that we are is much greater and more powerful than the individual selves that we take on.
Isn't there a considerable thrust in this country and in the world today to overcome death? And what kind of a place would the world be if we were to accomplish that end?
I assume what you mean by overcoming death is achieving some kind of immortality or longevity in our physical bodies.
Putting it off indefinitely with replaceable parts. You go in and get your batteries charged, and organ transplants, and I'm sure synthetic organs are coming. And so when one body part wears out, you just replace it with a new one, and you keep going on that way. And diseases are all overcome. There are no life-threatening diseases anymore. Automobiles are banned and things like that.
Well, I happen to be among that minority that believes that, in a sense, that is possible, but it won't happen through medicine. It'll be happen through what people do with their minds. That is, that we all create our own reality, and we create death as well. And if we could somehow get our whole set of cultural beliefs and our individual beliefs turned around, that we could live to be very, very great. You read in the Bible that so-and-so lived to be 150 or 300 or even 900 years. And I laughed at that for most of my life. And then I came to the point to realize that it's very likely true. But it isn't happening it's not going to happen through science. I'm quite certain. Death is a perception, and it's something that we as human beings have created for our own need, out of our own needs and our own convictions. And I think when there gets to be a sufficient public realization of that and acceptance of that, we'll just transcend it.
Alan?
Yes, I think we are constantly creating and recreating our own realities. We have this kind of what could be a naive notion that we live in a reality and we all share it, and it is what it is, and it's stubborn, and it has these particular laws, and all we can do is work within it and study it and be molded by it. This may not be true. It may not be anywhere close to truth. And some of the, I think, deepest insights in religion or whatever have been precisely to challenge it and to suggest that this is the ultimate falsehood. And maybe the most meaningful way to change the fear of death, or in a very real sense, death itself, is to change our ideas about it and change, of course, the way we are living our lives now, because that's the key.
This is Infinity. Remember to keep your mind open and listen to your heart. I'm Charlie Seraphin. Thank you for listening.